And so I like to practice where I'm like really learning a tune and learning the sound of that tune, but I can be flexible with how I'm incorporating that into like vocabulary, my own vocabulary, right? Right, that's the middle of the bridge. But where I'm starting from a place of like, okay, it happens on this street, it happens at this time, it happens with these people, right? That's my like starting off point. And if I want to get weird after that, I can. But out of all respect to the tune, right, I'm like coming with this knowledge of where everything's happening. It's so important to just practice simple things. And the more I learn about how our brains work, our brains, you know, like the cells are communicating with one another. And if we focus on like something really complex, we don't really understand, we don't personalize it where it's going to stay in us. And I mean, I have more to, in thinking about this, something that I have tried to do with my students is talk about how to make vocabulary their own. And so as an example, can I show you something?
Of course.
Okay, perfect. So I took out a recording of Sonny Stitt playing on Indiana, and he's playing all this fast stuff. And of course, it would be tempting to like, transcribe something that's real flashy. But instead, what I have found to be helpful is to find little nuggets that you like, right? That's really important that you like it. Not just that someone told you it's good. Sometimes it's good to play something that someone told you is good because you respect that person. You want to play like them. There's nothing wrong with that. But finding something that's simple and you know where it happened too. That's very important instead of just playing something hard and having no idea where to use that. So I found this little thing that he played, and I think it was in a different key, but I'm going to play it in the same key as My Little Suede Shoes. So just that little thing. So this is just something I've taught myself, but I think of like, okay, something like that. What's the simplified version of that? So what I hear is some people might be sort of moved by the, and it's easy to be moved by that because it's more flashy, right? Sometimes that stuff like sticks with us. But for me, I found that like thinking about that is more of the thing that I would actually use. So then this is something that I've done for myself whenever I'm practicing, and like I'll think about just vamping on whatever that was. So this was over, I think, like a 5 chord. So I'm not necessarily going to put on a track, but I might put on a drum track, and I'm just going to barely change that little shape. And I wrote out some variations. So right? So in real time, I would come up with stuff like that. And one thing I think is really important, and I try to, when I'm teaching, I try not to interject my own opinion sometimes. So when someone's like digesting vocabulary, I'll try to encourage them like, okay, what could you hear being next? And sometimes they'll play something that like almost feels right, but it's not quite right. And I'll encourage them to stick with it and try to see how they can fix that little idea just to finally like just feel good. And a lot of the times it's just like one note that needs to be shifted rhythmically. So sometimes when I'm looping something, it could be really hard changes, it could be simple changes. I prefer simple changes because then I could do really hard stuff eventually to it. But I'll just jam out on a little idea, and I'll think of like, if I was, if I had to write an article on this concept, how can I expand on that? So that's like my mindset, right? So this is very vulnerable because I'm going to make mistakes, but you'll be here with me. Yeah. And my time's not going to be perfect. The next step is like going to put on, time behind me, but I'm just going to let myself explore some ideas. And I might kind of camp out when when there's something there, but like I want to just get it a little bit different. And like sometimes I'll put on like a different groove. I don't know if it would really work with certain grooves. Like sometimes you can put on like a funk groove. Mm-hmm. Not sure if this one would really, but that's where you're experimenting. How can I use something that I know in this one setting? How can I morph it, right? And your answer might be like, yep, it doesn't work. But it's you're getting your wheels spinning and you're trying to be creative.
Yeah, exactly. In that process, you're learning through that discovery. One thing I noticed is there was no question what the time was the entire time you played. I mean, you communicated the time so clearly, and I could see you physically embodying the time. I feel like we can play anything in terms of note choices as long as it's in time, right? We can get away with anything basically. But as soon as you get out of time, it's not convincing anymore, right? And it could be the most hip notes or substitutions, but if it's not in time, it just falls short. And that's a bit of a kind of what you demonstrated when you said, this is me playing out of the character of the tune before, right? It started to get out of time too. And it really translated. I've got a question here that I wanted to ask that's kind of a follow-up. How do you think about balancing vocabulary you've practiced with spontaneous ideas on the bandstand? So the kind of same vein of thought there.
Well, I think that this way of practicing where you're kind of improvising with the concept, if you're able to incorporate that in your practice, then on the bandstand, it just kind of flows into that. Mm-hmm. So that's the point. That's where I'm at now. But as a less experienced player, I probably was learning vocabulary and really trying to plug it in. I guess I would also say that another thing with vocabulary is thinking a little bit outside the box. Like say and this is something that maybe I would do when I was younger, but trying to see like, where could I use this that's not on where I'm finding it, right? So it could be like this little shape where it happens, where Sonny Stitt plays it. It's like a 5-chord wanting to go to the next 8-bar phrase and resolve to 1, right? So this shape, though, could fit in, on the 2-chord before that, right? There's other little places that it could work. So I guess like remembering that even if you are working on vocabulary, how can you use it in a different way than it was presented to you? And it's like learning a language. So of course, it's not going to be perfect. You're maybe going to make some mistakes. You might not sound like your hero initially, but it's just trying things and then hearing, like, trying to be objective. Like, did that work, or like, did I lose something by using it there?
Right. Yeah, I think transforming it into your own thing, like you just did, what you just demonstrated, as fast as possible. As soon as you learn that thing,
yep.
If you can take that approach of, I'm going to change this into something else that's similar that draws upon those things, but then it becomes yours quickly, right? And it's less of a piece of vocabulary that you're going to rattle off and more of a sound or a concept or a shape or something that you can transform, right?
Yep, exactly. And one thing I did, this is, again, going back to my concept of sometimes reading out of a book is really useful, but sometimes coming up with your own exercises is really cool. And again, taking like a shape and understanding like kind of the sound and trying to, again, like if you're thinking of like a plot, where does this happen? Who's involved, right? Like that whole thing. What I did, I played a note on my piano. So I played the tonic, so in this case, Sonny Stitt plays this over a 5 chord. I played the 1 chord or the tonic, right? And then I took this shape, and it's not a perfect transposition because I think sometimes we think of, okay, I'm learning this shape. Now I'm going to learn it in 12 keys. That's really good. And keep doing that. That's really important. But what I did is I tried to make a scale pattern. So I made this little pattern. And again, it doesn't perfectly translate off of each scale degree. So if I take out the little and just do, right? But then the chromatic tones, these are the ones that don't perfectly translate. So the interesting thing, again, it's weird to hear somebody talk about these things because this is the way my mind is interpreting these things. The way that somebody else might interpret it might be a little different, right? And it's that process of allowing yourself to like, even, we talked for a second about the idea of composing as a saxophonist, right? So in my eyes, like thinking about playing as if you're writing in the moment is like the goal. To play with intention. I mean, again, going back to now, like Penny from Pee Wee Herman, she's someone that just rambles, and you kind of roll your eyes back because it's ridiculous. But playing as if you're composing in the moment, I think is really cool. And then taking a moment to digest what you're working on and even create your own exercises while exercises that sound like material you might use. So I wrote out that little pattern that's, diatonic-ish. And then the interesting thing is the way it kind of flowed, like it's naturally in 3/4. So then I added like a little note to make it feel like comfortable in 3/4. So instead of just going, I went, right? And then that's kind of a cool thing. I may never go back to it, but it was something that I was able to kind of think about, be creative about, and have fun with.
Before we keep going, I want to mention something that can help you organize your practice and really connect the dots. It's called the Modern Pentatonics Crash Course. Unlock modern jazz sounds with 5 notes. This 95-page workbook is packed with detailed exercises, visual diagrams, key insights, and transpositions for every horn. And the best part, each of the 5 sections comes with its own video lesson where I demonstrate the concepts in real time so you can hear and see exactly how they work. It's designed as a companion to the lessons on my Next Level Sax YouTube channel, but it goes much deeper with in-depth analysis, breakdowns, and exclusive exercises you won't find anywhere else. And honestly, for the amount of content you're getting, 95 pages plus video lessons, it's now available for an incredible value. So if you're ready to bring fresh colors and modern lines into your solos, grab your copy of the Modern Pentatonics Crash Course today. You'll be amazed at what 5 notes can do.
I know you've been exploring some of the more brain-related neural connector practice methods and how that's all kind of coming together, or how it can come together. And you've done some more extensive studies than many of us in terms of seeking out that information. You want to?
Sure, yeah. So I somehow came across this really interesting person. He's really well known, but Jim Quick. And he had like a brain injury when he was growing up. So he had to as a young adult, had to relearn like how to learn. And he did all the things that people say to do, study, read, and like he made himself sick because of like how studious he was. And anyways, like he's got a great podcast. That was probably one of the things that got my mind rolling. And I do have a passion for teaching. I love troubleshooting things. And then along the same lines as we talked about earlier, where after years of playing, things are tedious. You have to find new ways to frame things. And so I'm always listening to podcasts and trying to learn about the art of learning. And I came across this really interesting person named Molly Gabrian, and she's a violist. She has her doctoral degree in playing viola, and she's taught at universities for years. And right now she's at NEC. She is teaching students how to practice. And so they can come to her and show her their goals and how they're currently going about things. So I came across her interviewed on a podcast, and I actually reached out, had a few lessons, and there's so much more for me to learn, even from Molly. One of the things that she was saying for me, because I was asking her about memorizing things, and she was saying that our brains work best, most efficiently, when they can categorize things and like really break things down. So along the lines of what we're talking about, and it doesn't really matter how somebody else approaches that thing. It really matters like personal influence, like if you make an association with like a song and a location or a phrase, you know, like a piece of vocabulary and an emotion or whatever it might be, right? But it's really interesting that those things are so important when it comes down to like the way our brains work. Because you can hammer all day long the typical things that people teach you, like, okay, play your scale at 250, you know, eighth notes at 250, and or like shed giant steps or whatever it might be. And like someone can drive themselves crazy and be practicing that for 8 hours. And these simple things are actually, from a science perspective and the way that our brain works, they're more efficient to utilize than just hammering yourself and, you know, hoping after hours of practicing that you're able to do something.
Mm. And have you found any of those techniques to really be super helpful?
I think that yes. You know, we all have weaknesses. So I would say that if I had to like memorize a classical piece, it's harder for me, right? I didn't grow up doing something like that. So something like a page off of a sheet of music where I had to just really know something, it's harder for me to retain something like that. So it's, again, going back to like our neurons in our head, all speaking to each other and having patterns, having certain routes that they're really used to taking, right? So the challenge I find is when there's a weakness, that because we all have weaknesses, I don't care who it is, right? John Coltrane had weaknesses. I don't know what, he couldn't play like whoever else, right? He couldn't play like Ben Webster. Maybe he could have when he was younger, because he was, who knows, right, what he sounded like. But we all have weaknesses. And I think that having other ways that are outside of the box to work on things is really important so that it's not super frustrating. So I try to utilize these things. I try to like kind of implement them. I'm still learning.
Yeah. That reminded me of a question that I wanted to ask that was, do you do anything outside of music that you find really helps to influence your music?
Oh, gosh, yeah. You know, it's funny because when I was younger, for better and for worse, it was just like I ate jazz, right? Ate it for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. But the longer I live, I realize how much other things impact what we bring to music and being refreshed, having inspiration that we experience in other areas of our life, just like joy and peace and all that stuff is so important. Relationships. One thing that I do that I love, but I don't always do consistently, is I paint. Oh, wow. So the thing I love about painting is I love textures. I love colors. What else? I love when you're doing acrylics, you get to build on whatever you're painting. So like the first strokes you put down on the canvas, you don't have to like love them. You don't need to be married to them, right? So you can keep on changing them and it like evolves over time. And so what I start with, especially not being a trained artist, what I start with is very different than what I end up with. And what I love, and I try to bring into playing, what I love about art is I grew up doing it. My mom encouraged art of all types, crafts, and just making things. So what I love is just that it's an expression, right? It's something that I can like make with my hands. It's something like I can see. So I don't always hang up what I make, but it is a really cool thing that like you can reflect on what you did. And then the thing that I love the most is that it brings out a childish creativity. And I think the goal of playing music is hanging on to that childish creativity. So like the thing that pulled you in from when you first heard music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not being afraid to take risks. Because when we're really young, we, for a lack of knowledge, maybe of knowing what the situation is, we take risks unknowingly, and we find out things that we never would have if we had not taken those risks. I love that. From your perspective, what are the most important skills young musicians need to succeed in today's jazz world beyond playing well?
It's interesting because I feel like I can think back very easily to when I was a student and I looked to mentors and older people as the people that had all the knowledge. I'm very aware of what I don't know. And I think that every generation has to figure out new things. Part of that is how things are always changing. So what works for me won't work for them, right? So I think if anything, just a curiosity for, being creative is how you put together ideas. So even if I said I had the thing that's going to help kids starting college and then the thing that would help them for launching into their career, it's probably going to change in like 2 years. And if they were taking my word as the jazz Bible, right, of like business or whatever, I can guarantee it's not going to be the right thing. It would limit their thinking outside of the box that everybody needs. So they might see like an avenue for or where they fit in the world. And if someone's brave, they will be able to pursue that.
I love that.